I'm not usually the public speaker, but I'm happy to bring you a wonderful speaker today. And I wanted to first start by saying we're thankful for having Rod Dickerson here as her videographer. Mr. Dickerson has been producing films, documentaries, and commercials for a long while, so we're happy to have his expertise in filming this. And I am thrilled to be here from the Center for the Education of Women at the University of Michigan. Our Michigan Partners Project is a Ford Foundation funded grant that has been working to increase the capacity of organizations and individuals across the state that are working to increase economic security, particularly for low-income women. But as you all know, the state's had some hard times, so there are a lot of us that are having a hard time. And we thought that it would be important to be bringing you the topic of paid sick days as one policy example of a way that we can be improving economic security, not just for low-income women, but for everyone. And Ms. Nyeeyah Waldron is here with us today to talk about that. Ms. Waldron is a graduate of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She's the wife and mother of 4 children, and she's gone through a very challenging journey over the years to achieve her own higher education and being able to basically exemplify the benefits of higher education in being one other tool for advancing economic security for women. Ms. Waldron is a skilled professional with over 10 years of experience working with clients from diverse backgrounds to build product and brand messaging effectiveness. She provides brand message effectiveness and promotional representation for Fortune 500 companies at trade, educational, and promotional events. With exceptional communication and problem-solving skills, she has represented her clients effectively and built relationships with key stakeholders. Ms. Waldron volunteers at CoachMac, an organization that mentors young women between the ages of 7 and 12. The program provides leadership training and helps young women to become tomorrow's leaders. She is the daughter of the civil rights activist Dr. Amina Omar, also known as Evelyn Pierce, at the time of the Tougaloo 9 sit-in at the Jackson, Mississippi Public Library, and Abdul Aziz Omar, brother of Malcolm X. Please join me in welcoming Nyeeyah Waldron.
So again, hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name again is Nyeeyah Waldron, and I am an advocate and have been one for a very long time. As you heard in my bio, my parents were very active in the civil rights movement, and as the old saying goes, the apple usually does not fall too far from the tree. And so when I heard about the Michigan Partners Project, I literally walked into their office and just sat down with the project manager at that time, who was Ebony, and let her know after I read their brochure that this project was discussing my life and that I wanted to be a part of it, because as of that point I had not found an effective way to communicate with the world how I wanted to improve it. And joining this project allowed me an opportunity to put a face to a label that I think is a lot of the time misrepresentative. Low wage, low income does not necessarily translate into unskilled. It does not necessarily translate into being non-hardworking. And so because the MPP is an initiative that's supported by the Ford Foundation, it actually provided me an opportunity to make a little money and come out and speak to wonderful groups such as yourself. But basically, the MPP through funding from the Ford Foundation involves the faculty from the University of Michigan and other colleges, along with representatives of nonprofit organizations, advocates such as myself, and low-income women in Michigan. And it's convened by the University of Michigan Center for the Education of Women. And these partners advocate for policies and supports that can increase the economic mobility of Michigan's low-income women, specifically of color. Today, I'd like to share my personal story with you and explain why paid sick days is an important benefit that all Michigan workers would and should be able to earn. So in 2005, this beautiful little baby here, she's a 34-week-old preemie, and I gave birth to her in 2005 in Manhattan, New York. I was working the auto show, giving a presentation, and my water broke at 34 weeks. And so to make a really long story short, I was on bed rest because she punctured her bag at the top. And so for as long as I was on bed rest, she stayed and baked for a little bit longer. At 34 weeks, we had to deliver her. And unknowingly, I actually got an infection from this I was in the hospital for 6 weeks and ended up with an infection, was off work for 3 months, barely could get the job back that I had before I went to the auto show because I did not have any. I had been at this company probably for 4 years, and I had accumulated 3 sick days or vacation days or whatever you want to do with those days. But in an emergency situation like that, when FMLA, which I will discuss further in the presentation, ran out, and I got sick many months later, there was nothing that I could do. And so, as difficult as for me to say, what they determined was not, in addition to having toxic poisoning, I actually developed postpartum depression. And my doctor said, you need to take off work now because you're making this is going to be worse and you really need to address the issue. Make a really long story short, I couldn't afford to, and things became so bad that I had to be hospitalized. And it ended up being for 3 days, and they were probably the best 3 days of my life because for the first time I actually received some of the help that I truly needed. To embrace being a new mother, for them to determine why my system was shutting down, that some of the chronic health issues I had weren't in my mind. They were finally able to find them in lab and results. And so as hard as that was for me, I lost my job. And at that particular time, I am a co-breadwinner in the household. And at that time, he was my fiance. He's now my husband. Carried our household for probably 8 months, but he did so with a disability that he cannot work full time. And so the absence of one income for that period of time literally became a shuffling deck of cards, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so again, because I did not have any savings, essentially after 3 months I had exhausted my savings, and I literally used to laugh when I saw the DTE bills in red because I knew, well, I can only rob Peter to pay Paul. Literally every bill I had was in either utility was in shut-off status, my student loans were behind, just the standard things that most Americans go through when you reach hard times. And so to make a long story short, it took me 2 years to rebound from something that I don't feel like I could have worked hard to pull myself out of this situation. I was ill and I needed help, and there was nothing in the system to help me. And unfortunately for me, that was baby number 2, and so I have baby number 4, but I've experienced that 3 times, being ill with pregnancies and somewhere along the way getting ill and not being able to receive any help. And so I'm sure at this point you would probably think, why should you care about paid sick days? Well, I cared about paid sick days because I think had I been able to receive an appropriate amount of paid sick days, I probably would not have lost my job. I probably would have been able to take off 3 days to be able to get the medical treatment that I needed, which should have been on an outpatient basis versus being hospitalized and then losing a job. And unfortunately, 41% of American households are not only headed by women, but they are also co-breadwinners. So of that 41%, they're headed by women. 22% are co-breadwinners. So the economic status of women since the Great Depression has changed. We were, at one point, we could stay at home and take care of the kids and take care of our elders, and that was the standard American culture and the standard expectation for an American female, regardless of color. But subsequent of the Great Depression and the need for us to enter the labor force, that's drastically changed. And the United States has usually been somewhat, I give it a C minus on being progressive in the way that they implement policies. But we've implemented some policies that have dealt with child labor and some other issues that have been brought up in society that have been major issues. But for some reason, we have yet to pass any federal legislation that addresses the fact that as a human being, everyone deserves paid sick days. And in addition to that, specific to Michigan, there are 1.6 million Michiganders who lack this. As I've stated, that we're the doctor moms. We are 1 in 3 working women. They also care for elderly, disabled, or special needs. So the legislation would actually not just address when you're sick, but the legislation that we're asking to be passed is going to address that you should be able to take care of your loved ones. And so then when you think about the disparity of who is really affected by no sick days, well, it's not those who have corporate jobs who can negotiate the amount of days, and even those corporate workers deserve more paid sick days, in my opinion. However, this legislation should particularly address the low-wage workforce, who generally tends to be majority female, and we are talking about primarily a service industry. So there are no unions who are addressing and fighting at a certain point for the benefit of their workers. Obviously, there's been a lot of pushback. Businesses in many different industries, from the restaurant industry, which is one who's I found in Michigan, been extremely against paid sick days for their employees. Do not take into account that everyone who served you today, if they're ill and they can't take off for their paid sick days, there's a lot of people in this room who will go home and infect a lot of other people. But at the end of the day, we are people who have to make we have to make an income for our families as well. And so it would be certain times where even outside of the pregnancies and those illnesses that I had, I remember going to work with bronchitis, pink eye, and pneumonia because a project was due. And in retrospect, I think about it, and not that I laugh, but I had a coworker who 1 week later had pink eye, and then I noticed 2 weeks later all of her children in her household had pink eye. And so I knew at that point that I was really, especially in that environment, I was the domino effect of that. And I really, really, really felt terrible. And so I was trying to be productive in coming to work, and I needed the money. But at the end of the day, I think the domino effect of me coming to work and infecting so many other people, and that's just very specific to me. Now I run from people who come to work with germs because I remember what I passed along. And then there's been a couple of times where I felt like, listen, I understand you don't have any paid sick days, but at the end of the day, I can't afford to go home and then infect my 4 children, and especially with 2 younger babies. And so being presenteeism is not productive. You want an employee who can come and give 100% effort and efficiency to do their jobs. That's a win-win situation. To pay someone to come to work, to come to work and not be effective actually is a negative for all businesses. And again, earned sick time, it equals higher morale and job loyalty, because for the companies that I found after working with some of the other companies I've worked for, I've typically been extremely loyal to and have been very grateful after having come and experienced so many no vacation, no paid time off days unless you work here for 10 years. I've been extremely loyal. And University of Michigan is an institution that I look at their policies, and obviously, we all want more, but I look at some of the bases of their policies, and I feel like as an employee of this institution, which I am not, I'm a spokesperson, but if I were an employee of this institution, I would be extremely happy with their structure of what happens when you're sick, which is not included in your vacation days, which I think is awesome. So again, we are fighting for not only the health of my family, but this is really about the health of your family as well. And so again, a lot of people will ask, well, doesn't the Family Medical Leave Act allow workers to take sick days if they need them? Well, actually it doesn't. And under the FMLA, a qualified individual has to work for a company for a specific period of time, and the company has to have 50 or more I believe employees. Yes, it's 50 or more employees, correct? And then you have to accumulate 1,250 hours. So if you're a part-time employee or you're a seasonal employee, there's just no way you will ever accumulate this. But at the same time, you're working here, you're consistently part-time, you're consistently seasonal, then you should consistently be able to accrue, not be given, but for every a set of hours that you work, this legislation that we are asking to be passed and stand behind is saying by what you work for, then you should have a specific period of time set aside for you in case you have any medical emergency. So again, FMLA is not structured. It's only structured for longer periods of illnesses and recovery. And again, that is, you don't get paid when you have FMLA. You can get your job when you feel better. So how do we advance the cause of paid sick days in Michigan? Because there are other states who passed this legislation. I thought about moving to Oregon because I said, wow, in California, because they've literally passed some legislation to recognize people as human beings, because it always amazes me that we know that robots and cars break down. And we factor that in, but we're human beings, and nowhere in any of our business relationships, which is a big factor in the United States of America, do we take into account that this human commodity is going to get sick, and when that happens, what do we do? So in Michigan, there are currently 3 different approaches for increasing access to paid sick days. One is creating a statewide law that will mandate a minimum number of paid sick days. A second is a statewide initiative in which voters would decide to put such a law into effect. And the third is that individual employers are always free to improve their policies by giving workers paid sick days. And I'll say more about these different ways in my next few slides. So for the 3rd year in a row in Michigan, the House Bill 4167 and Senate Bill 101 is trying to address the need for paid sick days for Michigan workers. These bills will require Michigan businesses to offer 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours a person worked. Again, that is for every 30 hours a person worked. For a full-time worker who works 40 hours per week, that's 5 hours of earned paid sick time leave per month. The bills would cap the required number of paid sick days to 40 hours, which is 5 business days, with less than 10 employees. If a company has, less than 10 employees, and 72 hours, which is 9 days for larger businesses. So, how you can help us is you should contact your state representative and senator and let them know. After you guys are very, very intelligent, so I'm sure you're going to look up these bills if you probably don't already know them. But contact your state representatives and see what their position is on these bills. So just as a glimpse of where do we stand overall. So unfortunately, statewide bills such as these have gone nowhere in Michigan and other states where the legislature is controlled by conservatives. So in various parts of the country, cities started enacting their own paid sick day ordinances. In 19 cities, including the District of Columbia, in 19 cities, the District of Columbia, and 4 states, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Oregon, private businesses.
And very, so recent that I couldn't put it in the slide, Vermont.
Yes. Oh, okay. Vermont is another. Okay, well, great. Vermont. Private businesses are required to provide their workers with a minimum number of paid sick days. And in order to prevent any cities in Michigan from doing this, unfortunately, our legislator passed a law this summer prohibiting such ordinances. In the map here, you can see that the states or city with PSD laws are in dark green, and those states with active campaigns for a paid sick day law are in light green. And the states that have preemption laws preventing local paid sick day ordinances are in purple, and we are in purple. So states like Michigan have both a campaign. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Because we have a preemption law and an active campaign to get statewide paid sick days on the voted into on the ballot. So, using another method to increase the access to paid sick days in Michigan, community and labor faith organizations developed the Time to Care Coalition. This summer, which was in 2014, Beth? Was it 24? I'm sorry, 2015. Time to Care launched a statewide ballot initiative to give all Michigan workers the ability to earn paid sick days. The proposal, again, would allow employees to earn 1 hour paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. The coalition is currently still collecting signatures to put the measure on the ballot in November of 2016. And I urge you to learn more about that and get involved by visiting mytimetocare.org. Again, unless we collect the correct number of signatures, this will not be on a November 16th ballot. Another option is to, instead of holding the government or the legislature, which is a really huge entity accountable for what your employers are doing, is to encourage Michigan business owners to voluntarily provide paid sick leave. That would just really, for me, for every company that I've ever worked for, even the ones that I have grievances with, I've always addressed human resources about the not only the fairness, but the efficiency of having people come to work sick. And in some instances, I've gotten a really positive response. And in other instances, I've not gotten really positive responses. But that still will never stop me from taking it directly to the stores. And for those who've already implemented this, there are some successful businesses, again, owners who have implemented the policy, and those policies have been successful, and it is not deterred from their bottom line, because that is one of the negative statements about paid sick leave that I would specifically like to address, that it costs the business money to give the employee paid sick leave. First and foremost, the taxes that are paid should account for a portion of that. Second, what they have found in numerous different academic studies is that for the companies who voluntarily have given the paid sick day leaves, and for the initiatives and ordinances that address this, those employees are actually happier, loyal, and the business owners actually have a 9% profit. And so I know that we can all give out numbers. When you hear the paid sick days is going to cost a small business to lose their business or $50 million, I challenge you all to ask them where they're getting those numbers from, because the reports and numbers that I've seen have literally said exactly the opposite. And I'm not saying that, I mean, anybody can take a number and make it anything, but I think that there's a lot of misinformation about paid sick days and its efficacy and how efficient it truly is. So we're back to Nona. So she'll be 11 on April 11th. And I, in spite of her traumatic and entry into this world, this little baby who kicked me and jumped in my belly, I think that she really wanted to come out to get here to do this, because she's a jumper and a mover. And when I look at her, because she was a preemie, she had some issues when she was younger. And when I think about who she is now and where she was when she was smaller, I always get a little emotional, because there were times that I could not be with Nona because Nona always had an ear infection. And it was really because she was a preemie baby. So I had to go to work. And I couldn't be with Nona. I knew that she would be okay, and I really prayed that she would be okay. But I think the two other experiences I've had after that, where I've been able to be with my children and invest in them and raise them and be with them when they're sick, are so much better than crying, going to work, knowing that your baby is sick, but you can't be there for her because it's just an earache. Well, an earache, I believe, is something that a mom should be able to be with her child for. And so when I look at this beautiful young lady, I am very grateful that I had additional support to help develop her into the person that she wanted to be. And so ultimately, my point is that the economic stability of myself directly affects Nona, who will directly affect someone else. And at the end of the day, if my economic status is disparaging, and I'm 41% of American households, then that means that my growth is directly tied to the growth of not just the state of Michigan, but the entire country. And so I say this because I've pretty sure that we all have children and grandchildren in this room. And so at the end of the day, you will want them to be able to grow into something greater than what they came from. And so for people like myself and my daughter, I want to move from the 41% of disparaging group so that she can grow and be whatever she wants to be without knowing, okay, you're going to have a very limited, slim chance of having economic sufficiency when you're an adult, because that's what the statistics say. Maybe I won't be a part of the 41%, maybe she won't be, but the bottom line number that I believe and have weeded out says that she has a really uphill battle to face. And so I would like, as most parents would like, and as I'm sure you would like, to make your children's road and path a little bit easier. I think that one of the main things, again, that we can do to remove a systemic barrier is to address, when you have employment, give your people paid sick days. And so with that, we have to take action. And so as you can see, there are two legislation bill numbers. Senate is 101 and the House is 4167. If you can go to openstates.org and find your legislator, but I'm sure you guys know because she's here. And then you can also go to these other resources. They're awesome resources too. Number one, going to the Better WBB. It does support the workers, but what you'll also get is an opportunity to see some very real comments about what employees feel about companies. And for me, I want to eventually get into information systems so that I can regulate, well, not regulate, but at least be a part of the movement that says you have the right to know, and you have the right to know that the numbers I'm providing you are real. So that completes my presentation, and it's been a pleasure, and I am happy to answer any or all questions or no questions if you have any. So thank you so much, and you lovely people have a wonderful day.